Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Vagrant Queen. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we have like our trio landing on a planet because now they have to refuel and everything. And I love like that whole thing of like, because obviously Elida is kind of all about like, May, I don't want more blood on my hands. And May's like, yeah, you kind of already said that once before. Isaac's been like, oh, don't worry, show her some like show her some cats and stuff like that, and she'll kind of soften up. And then obviously, May looks up internet cats and stuff like that. It's like, oh, I guess Isaac must have introduced like Elida to them or something like that. But it's also interesting because the planet they're on apparently it's kind of basically become like a garbage planet, and because of that, all the species on the planet had to adapt. Like it seemed like they focused on one specific, but I guess all the species around there. I mean, I assume because like what do they call beaters? The ones that look like gorillas but with like super long arms. Those things super scary as hell. And also those other like creatures who are kind of, I guess, I was thinking pigs, but they're not pigs. They're something else. But I guess they all kind of are inhabitants of this particular planet. But as they're refueling and everything, lo and behold, first Isaac and then eventually Elida get kidnapped. And it's interesting too because it's like, oh, like the guns kind of like, because even like the whole thing with May getting attacked, it's like, oh, literally none of these guns are working. She's like, oh, please, please. And she ends up getting the one gun that ended up firing. It's like, is it just because they were broken or is it just because they don't charge? Because even May had handed them like basically things that work as comms. And he's like, oh, I thought these were broken. She's like, no, they just weren't charged. It's like kind of a good thing that she's on board. But what I think is kind of neat about this episode too is, well, for one, how they utilize music. I think is kind of interesting. Interesting timing too, because obviously I've most recently watched, the show Stumptown, and Stumptown, if you're unaware, it's also based on a comic book. It's a TV show where like they utilize music and it kind of plays into the show. But it's very like obviously when you think about it too, it's like once again kind of the Guardians of the Galaxy kind of comparison, which I feel kind of shitty when I do that, but it's such an easy concept to make because it's like obviously music play a big part in that, but it doesn't seem like music is used more as a just kind of like it's not necessarily used the same way. I mean, in one aspect of this episode, it's used kind of like it is in Guardians, but it's still kind of used differently. It's more used like in Stumptown, but even Stumptown's kind of used a little more like I'm going on a tangent and all that. I do apologize, but nevertheless. But it was, like I said, there was a lot of interesting aspects to this episode because we finally got, Elida and Isaac's past. And it's interesting kind of breaking it down like, because I was curious like how long their history went back. They only go back 2 years because in fact she ended up saving his life. And even I was like, so you ended up betraying the woman who saved your life? I was like, that doesn't make any sense. But we got the story. I love it. It's like, she's like, yeah, I would be careful about trading the spiders. They'll understand. It's like, nah, I'm good. 5 minutes later. And I love that that's a major time increment in this episode that every time something goes down, it's like 5 minutes later. And he's literally being dragged away, and Elida's like, all right, fine, I'll buy him off of you. It's like, sorry, our captain wants him personally, wants to, take his skin and wear it as like a coat or something like that. And then I just like, wait, you want to do what with my skin? I was like, Jesus. And but I like, Elida was trying to buy him off, but they wouldn't accept. But he's like, well, you can't because basically there's like a safety zone where you can't mess with us. And then Elida was like, yeah, but you crossed the line a couple steps back. And proceeds to kick everyone's ass with style. And the last dude was like, come back over the line, but she whips him over with that whip she had picked up and kicks his ass. And Isaac's like, holy crap, you did it. It's like, I think I said Kansas last episode. I can't remember. I want to say that he was from, because I remember hearing it from the trailer. It's Canada, not Kansas. Like I said, I think I said Kansas last episode, but I don't remember. But nevertheless, because like he never really went into specifics either about how he ended up in another galaxy. I think all he said was like he got slingshot here, and it's like, and in fact, it's apparently so in totality, he's been in this galaxy for like 4 years. Because 2 years prior to meeting Elida, he was on his own kind of looking for a way to get back to Earth. And so he works with Elida, and they're like, all right, so, he's trying to make a deal with her about the ship and everything, 70-30. And that kind of gets whittled down to 50-50, but he's got all these parking tickets. And I love that whole thing of, like, knocking the guy out, once again, 5 minutes later, and dropping the thing on him. It's like, don't worry, dude, you'll be fine. Don't worry, guy. When you wake up, you might have a headache, but you'll be fine. And I love the music going, and Elida looking at him and just kind of walking away. I was like, I love it because that's not the only time they do it. They do it twice. I love it because when they're being held by that guy and he's like, don't worry. He's like, oh, you must be. Oh, you want to go into battle? You must be hungry. And it goes in again. I love that. And just everyone's just kind of got that. Ugh, why'd you make that joke? Even other dudes were like, yeah, because that doesn't get old that you keep making that joke. But I also love that Elida and Isaac had that whole back and forth about, because it's like, wait, you say these guys are cannibals, right? So that means we're okay. She's like, what? It's like, well, you said, yeah, he's a cannibal because he ate one of his own people. So that means, she's like, you really shouldn't be focusing on like, you know, the technicalities of cannibalism. You should be more focused on getting out here. But Isaac did bring up an interesting point. They're like, well, if they're cannibals, that means they're only focused on eating their people. So we're not their people. Cannibalism means it involves eating your own species. But sadly, they're not like we only cannibalize on our people. We eat every other species too. So it's like you kind of lose in that situation, but you get where Isaac was coming from with that whole conversation. I even love like their the guy in the cell beside them who's like a bunny guy, and Isaac being like, oh yeah, the only way we're communicating is through these drawings. I was like, actually, he's pretty good, and I love the bunny dude going like, oh, like almost kind of waving his hands like, oh shucks, you're being too kind. I thought that was kind of neat. But getting back to like the back and forth of like understanding like how they got to where they were, they actually spent time together. They were scavenging together and everything. It's like, oh, they were good. They actually I was like, okay, so how did we get to the whole like you shooting her abandoning you thing? Like, how did that all go down? Well, it turns out because she never told Isaac the truth about herself, about the whole like, being a queen and everything. And so Isaac ends up finding out because some dude pointed out like, oh, you don't know who she is, do you? And so Isaac's like, you didn't tell me. I literally had to give that guy my cut of the like profits we made just to shut him up about this. And for her, it's like, because for him, it's like we could have been rolling in the dough this entire time. But the thing is, like, you know, because the sad thing is they kind of lost, like the communications kind of trailed off because he's like, we could basically get those Republic guys to kind of pay us top dollar. And she's like, so it was never about our friendship, like, oh, because I lied to you, whatever. It's always been about money. But he's like, we've just been scraping by. We can make big bucks off of this. And for that, she was just like, you know what? I'm going. And, you know, he's like, whoa, but what about my ship? She basically zip ties his legs together and he was trying to stop her. He even talked about it later on. He's like, if I wanted to shoot you, you know, I'm a terrible shot. Like, even if I wanted to shoot you, I still would have been off by like 10 feet. I meant to just stop you. I didn't mean to actually shoot you, you know? And because the sad thing is, Isaac didn't know at that time about it. Wasn't until later on that he found out about her situation. That the fact is, like, because I think in his mind he probably thought like, oh, you're just running from your responsibilities as a queen. That's all this is. Like, your family wants you back. Like, he didn't know that her entire family had been massacred. He didn't know that. So, but obviously, like, because he's like, because at the time he even admits it later on, he's like, I was so selfish, I was so concerned about my own situation, I didn't even bother asking why you were hiding in the first place, you know. So it was kind of, they both were kind of wrong, but more so than anything, Isaac was wrong, because I mean, Aleda shouldn't have to explain herself too, because it's like there's some things that she just doesn't want to talk about because it brings up a lot of bad memories. I mean, she's literally at that point she had been on a run for 13 years. You know, no, at that point, by the time that conversation happened, it had been 15 years. Because that's also another thing, too, I thought was interesting. Because I was wondering how far back this whole, like, bad blood between them was. It's like, oh, it was 3 months ago. It's like, no wonder you're still pissed. I mean, granted, any amount of time later, you'd still be pissed because he shot you and everything. But you're even more pissed. It's still fairly freshly new. That was 3 months ago. So obviously, you'd be still extra peeved about the whole situation. So I was like, it kind of makes sense, you know, in the grand scheme of things. But, luckily for them, May does show up to kind of save the day. And I thought it was kind of, because at first, like, you know, Isaac was like, the fact of the matter is, like, who's to say she's actually going to come to save us? Because it's like having a ship all to yourself or coming to rescue complete strangers. I kind of know where I would go. And she's like, and Elida is like, well, not everyone's like you. And he's like, you mean like us? Who are you kidding? So kind of showing that, you know, and I think that was kind of a thing where Elida kind of realized, like, she can kind of be very, like, distant with people in that regard, or at least the very least of like she kind of does whatever she needs to kind of survive. That's just always been her way, and that type of mentality, you know, because Isaac being like, we really aren't that different. You want to act like we are, but we're not. So it kind of, in the grand scheme of things, it's like it changes your perspective. You're like, all right, so Isaac's kind of a little douchey, but he's not as much of a dick as you thought he was, you know, in grand scheme of things, because we do see the scene where he kind of like oh, like he didn't give up the information to anyone, the Republic. He was doing a scam of like, hey, here's some false information. I'm gonna make a little cash off of this type of situation. But then he came across the wrong people, because one of those said people was someone that knew that Elito was still alive, because he was like, oh, you are someone that knew her and you're lying to protect her, and gave her, and it's like, yeah, it belongs to her mother. And it's like, wait, you want to pawn something off that belonged to her dead mother? It's like, oh, she thinks her mom is dead. It's like, no, she's locked up in a prison. And it's like, and obviously because of that, Isaac's like, no, you should probably keep this, because he didn't want to get involved, because he didn't want to feel responsible. But I think that speaks volumes, that it's like, oh, you hold on to it, just in case the next time you meet her. The fact is that he felt like, because that was like 2 weeks ago this whole situation went down, and so the fact is that he went looking for her too, I think speaks volumes, because even the dude was like, oh, the fact is you're willing to lie about everything means you care about her. So like, yeah, even though he shot her and everything, it's like things kind of, they had a little bad blood, but it's like they were good partners for like 2 years. But it just, at first he was kind of hurt because she lied about it, but also it's just like, it turns out it was more so because he's like, we're not taking advantage of the fact is you come from like a super wealthy family, especially because all this money was going to help funding them getting him back home to Earth and everything, and even him inviting Elita. They're like, oh, dude, you're gonna love it on Earth and everything. So I thought that was kind of pretty dope, because it kind of also, because at the time he didn't know, well, he still, like, because she told the story about like, oh, she's a scavenger and her parents aren't around. That wasn't 100% a lie, but so I think he was inviting her back home. It's like, because he was like, oh, you'll never have to worry about anything between us. I'm happily married and everything. So I thought that was just kind of like neat to kind of immediately get that backstory and kind of understanding where they came from with the whole situation. But Amay shows up and they're like, hey, look, oh, she did show up and save the day. And but I love that she immediately got distracted by that robot. She's like, oh my god, this robot can do all this stuff, and they're using you just kind of as like, a transporter for like meals and drinks, which I even love that Isaac makes that whole reference to Hansel and Gretel, because he's like, yeah, probably best not to know what this is, but it's like, oh, they're probably essentially like, oh, they're fattening us, that they are going to eat us and everything. So that's what this all is about. I love it. It's like, tastes like root beer. I forgot what he said. He said something that has a certain like aftertaste to it, but regardless, Amay came to rescue him. It's like, oh, what's the sale? And the dude's like, and they look to the other dude, and it's like, oh, Elliot is like, what number is for our sale? And he's like, 7. And she's like, I can clearly see that yours is the one that's named 7. And I love that. I was like, you gotta give major props to that dude, that he was a liar. I mean, granted, he's a terrible liar, because it's like you were immediately exposed for your lie, but man, he took a chance. I mean, it also sucks too, because it's like, well, if they said that, like she would have went to the door and it wouldn't have worked. So it's like, how? But I guess the whole thing is like, oh, it doesn't work on theirs. Oh, but look, mine's 7. Might as well toss it this way. I guess that would be his justification for it. But I still just thought like, yeah, but like I said, you took your shot, bro, and you gotta admire that, in the grand scheme of things. So, but I love that as Amay, and she's actually pretty good at taking care of herself. I love that, like, she had pushed that dude in the corner and she was kicking him like that, kind of basically curb stomping him. But that other dude was coming running to get the key that was on the robot, and she shot him in the leg, and then the music changed up into a completely, and I was like, oh dude, I like that little change up in the music. It wasn't even like that was like the third time they had changed it up. Like, well, before it was kind of making them distorting the music, but this was just a completely different change in beat, and I was like, oh, I like this with this. And like, even Isaac being like, oh man, this is actually really sad to look at, because home dude's like stumbling to catch up with this slow robot. I love it. But luckily they were able to get out. And I love that she smashes a glass over his head. It's like, how about fruit punch? And she's just laughing. I'm like, you're laughing at your joke. You're so full of yourself. I love it. And Isaac's like, not really fruit. Well, it's not really fruit. And she's like, yeah, but pretend that it does. He's like, your one-liners you need to work on your one-liners. They need to be a little more organic. I love it. I was like, I love it. But nevertheless, they managed to escape. But their escape is short-lived, because they could not cooperate on how to get out of there. And lo and behold, they got captured again. And the maid was like, you guys didn't want to listen to me. Like, I came back because, you guys needed help. And, everyone needs somebody to have their back, but it's like you two don't have each other's back. And so Isaac kind of apologizes, because obviously things didn't go down the way he wanted them to, and even tells Elida, like, this is where your mom is, that's what the guard told me, I swear that's it. And I was like, oh, like I said, he was being super honest, not unless there's more to it. But so far it's just kind of like, oh, he's on a redemption arc of just like, yeah, it's like when everything you heard about him last episode, like, man, what a dick. And it's like, you can make an argument. Maybe, like I said, he's a little douchey, but at the same time, you're like, he's actually kind of a pretty decent, actually kind of a good guy. So it's like, oh, it kind of works out in the end. And I think it was kind of good because now this also presents an opportunity for the both of them kind of like to repair their relationship after all of this. Because she was about to say something to Isaac too, but like they got cut off. And I love it that basically they get put into like the final bout and stuff like that. It's like, and you're up against shit, and it's like, oh my god, he's like, it's like basically the loser ends up getting cooked, and so Isaac's like, oh my god, we're up against Peter, and May's like, oh my god, is that his name? It's like, and Isaac's like, whoa, no, but like I called him that once, and he responded to it, so it just kind of stuck, and it's like, oh, and then like basically it turns out, and he's like, oh, one of those songs from Earth. He's like, I'm saying that right, Earth. And they're just like, eh. And I'm like, I kind of relate to that because I'm one of those people. I think I'm one of those people that says Earth with the F instead of Earth. I say Earth. I think. I don't know. It might be one of those things where I'm getting a little self-conscious and not realizing it and thinking I did it when I don't. Because I'm also one of those people saying I say water instead of water. Just I say some stuff weird. Like once again, I talked about it before. Someone got pissed because I say library instead of library. Or, yeah, I'd say library instead of library. Like, someone got super anally pissed about that. That was a whole thing. But nevertheless, it's one of those things. So, like, I kind of relate to it. It's like, yeah, because I do say Earth, don't I? I'm sure if you go back to any recording and I say that. I'm going to try and not do that anymore. We'll see if I'll be able to break that habit. But regardless, it turns out that the competition is karaoke. And I'm like, oh. So I was wondering, so have all these battles been karaoke, or is it just this specific one that's karaoke? Is what I'm curious about. Because we never saw any of the other matches, but we do see people cooking. So I'm assuming that's what this has all been about. And they try singing a song. Because I even love Isaac being like, really? Out of all the Earth tracks they could have picked, they picked this one? And neither Elida or Isaac get it, but Peter's over there killing it. And then May kind of sings her heart out. And it's like, oh, she's got the voices of an angel. And then like the trio join together. It's like, yeah, we're winning. But then Peter's burning. It's like, how about we help out the dude? And obviously they're about to get cooked. But then like obviously like, you know, Isaac suggests it's like, all right, you know, Yippee is kind of like the plan and everything, which I had skipped over that when they were taking off of this ship. He did the whole Yippee thing because he was like, oh, this is one of our an Earth, a classic tale on Earth. And I thought I was like, oh god, he's about to make it. I was like, okay, he's gonna make a movie reference. I was like, is it gonna be one I'm gonna get? And he says Yippee-ki-yay. I'm like, okay, good, Die Hard, okay, because you never know with those things, because obviously there's some references that will go over your head. So I was curious to see if it was gonna be like a reference I would get, but I'm like, okay, Die Hard. You went broad enough because they could have gone a little more like super like niche movie or reference to use, but they used a pretty broad enough stroke with the Yippee-ki-yay to be like, all right, Die Hard, I got it. And Elida like performs her Yippee-ki-yay, and I love that that's just the name for it, you know, because she's like, Yippee-ki-yay, that's actually pretty dope. And like even after all this time later, literally 2 years later, they probably performed it multiple times in that 2-year frame, but nevertheless, also, her being a badass, getting a damn gun and just like blasting, even at one point lifting that thing up to kind of act as a shield and just kind of going back to spraying. I'm like, dude, look at you being a badass. And also, more freaking like, it's not even, I don't even know if it'd be considered slow-mo. It's just still shots of just kind of like everything just kind of frozen and then the camera kind of panning. It's like, I love shit like that. I think it's so dope. I love stuff like that. That feels like it's one of those things of like, I haven't read the comic book that this is based on, and I haven't looked into the comic book. I've only ever seen like what Elida looks like in a comic book. So it's like one of the things you like Google for this, or just one of the images I've seen was just of what she looks like in the comic book. That's the only thing from the comic I've actually seen. So I don't know, but that feels like, I was like, that feels like a panel out of a comic book right there, just the way that was designed. But regardless, they end up shooting their way out. Peter gets free, ends up freeing all the other people, and they all make their escape. I love at the same time, Elida went back, grabbed the little robot, and gets on the ship, and Isaac's pointing a gun. She's like, really? Oh, you son of a... And he ends up shooting the thing behind her, and she's like, oh, he's like, oh, you thought I was going to... Ugh. Well, this is awkward. She's like, yeah. It's just like, oh. But nevertheless, he's a better shot than I think he kind of gives himself credit for. But I love that. It turns out like Elida had brought the little robot on board, which I'm like, oh, you guys basically have your R2D2. I was like, oh, that's pretty neat. So I'm interested to kind of see what kind of role that kind of plays going forward. But I also thought it was kind of neat the whole Amay situation of her deciding that she wants to stay. Because for her, it's like, yeah, without me, you guys won't last 5 minutes. Hence where I'm getting like, oh, man, they love that 5 minute increment. But now it's like also because we ended up learning that May and her brother, like, they come from a planet that doesn't exist anymore. Like, their planet got destroyed, so they kind of only have each other too. So I think for May, she recognizes the whole situation of, like, basically she's like, I've seen so much blood and pain and war that, you know, she's willing to help Elita out with this whole situation. So I think she can also sympathize too of like you wanting to, you know, protect the people that you care about. You know, you wanted to rescue your mom and everything. So I also thought it was kind of interesting. I didn't think about this last episode, but Chaz has like a fully blue face. The fact is that she doesn't, like, because part of her skin is blue, but then it kind of gets pale. And I'm like, is that because like maybe one of her parents wasn't whatever species they are? I wasn't wondering about that, or maybe it's just kind of like their species comes in different like shades or something like that. Part of me just wonders if there's some kind of significance to that. Are we gonna find out that Chaz isn't actually her blood brother? That there's something more to that, or maybe they are just half siblings. I don't know. I'm curious about that. You know, so I just thought that was kind of neat, and you know, obviously they're off to kind of find her mom. I also thought it was kind of neat because we see like the ambulance kind of beeping and stuff like that, and it seems like the loyalists from last episode are tracking it, and they got to the planet they were just on, but they just missed them, and they see that woman Gladys, who's like the lady that ended up betraying them and everything, ended up getting Elita trapped and everything, and it's like, oh, she's like, would you like to have are you guys looking for a good time? And she's like, oh yes, and the dude's like, no, not that type of good time. It's like, let's go and be on our way. And it's like, oh, which luckily he did do that because you were about to become someone else's meal. Because at first she was like, oh, I'm not going to do anything because the person that was paying me just got killed, so I'm just going to sit back and relax and enjoy the show. But I guess, like, you know, it's like, well, now it's all said and done, someone else is paying her, so like, well, got to get some of these people that are still alive meals and stuff like that. I'm also curious, like, the fact that they went through the trouble of setting her up, part of me is like, there's going to be more with that, isn't it? It has to be. Like, it feels like she's such a specific character. Maybe we won't see her, but it just seems like they're setting her up in some shape or form. We'll see if that ends up playing into it or not, but obviously showing that the loyalists are still following. They haven't given up on Elita. At the same time, we got more insight into how this whole Republic thing works, because we have, I even love that whole situation of Lazaro asking, like, it was just one queen, how did we not get her? It was, you're the most well-trained people in the universe or something like that. And one of the guards had raised his hand and was like, she had help. And it's like, some random person and a mechanic, you know, and then him having the answer to the admirals. It was interesting too because it's like, oh, you were the Marquis, and I was like, oh, you're a Marquis. So I was like, I don't know in the hierarchy. I'm familiar with the name Marquis. I mean, because it depends on what like the hierarchy is 100%, but like Marquis are decently high up people. Like, I don't know what an equivalent would be. Would it be like a bishop or something like that would be an equivalency, or would it actually be a demotion on where a marquis is? Because some things kind of treat marquis almost like they're kings themselves. Because I know, like, there's this game called The Last Remnant. David, he's a marquis. There's marquis, they're leaders. So that's why I don't know. Like I said, I guess it depends on the continuity and, like I said, the hierarchy of everything. But it sounds like he was a pretty big enough official, and it seemed. But he talks about the fact that he gave up that ranking well before he ended up helping, you know, basically overthrow the monarchy. But it was also interesting meeting at least like two admirals. We don't know if they're the only ones. There might be others. But kind of also showing you that Lazaro isn't top dog in this. That he's still kind of, sadly, he is on a leash. You know, because they're like, oh, well, we've heard this before. You know, trying to, you know, kill one little queen on her own, and you still couldn't manage that, huh? But he was like, it's like, no, you're going to come back here immediately, like we tell you to. So it's like he's on a very short leash. But he still hasn't given up because, for whatever reason, this is personal to him, because obviously he's also got Nim too, and Nim's in bad shape. I was like, oh, that sucks. I was like, because I figured as much. Obviously, the way last episode ended, you're like, oh, he's going to use Nim in some shape or form, but it's like, oh, he's going to use Nim to pump information. I thought maybe going to mind control him or fix him up and mind control him and manipulate him into being something that you could use to get to Elita. But nevertheless, He ends up trying to spin it. He's like, why all this loyalty? Like, because your planet is out of the star system where her family reigned. So, like, their monarchy didn't reach where you lived. But for him, it's like, it's because he heard what the Republic did. And it was such distasteful and terrible stuff that's why Nim helps. And he's like, oh, no, you got it wrong. Like, the monarchy oppressed people, like people you believed in for whatever reason and even saying that these people didn't deserve their position because this is just one bloodline who ruled over everything they didn't earn their position. They weren't voted in. It's just like, just because you're from this specific bloodline, we have to basically follow you and listen to your every word. So it seems like that might be kind of where this kind of stemmed from. I mean, we still haven't gotten into Lazaro's past of understanding why he's done what he's done. But he ended up torturing Nim. And it's like, the fact of the matter is Nim ended up killing himself so he wouldn't be a part of this. Like, he wouldn't turn her over. And even all Lazaro can say is, that loyalty could have been useful if only, if you had been on the right side of history or something like that. It's like, Jesus. But part of it is like, I hope he doesn't try to do the thing of like, oh, Nim is alive. I have him captured. If you want Nim, like he might try. That could be an angle they go down. Maybe not. It's even sadder because it's like, yeah, I mean, because there was also a part of me that was hoping that he lived, that maybe eventually they could rescue him or something. But it's just sad because it's like he tried to sacrifice himself last episode, and they'll never know that he actually went through even more stuff and went even further to protect Elena. So it makes, which is kind of a bummer that I chose this to kind of be the thing to kind of end off the episode, a review and everything. But it just, I don't know, that was just, it's at the same time you're like, oh, he was such a, steadfast dude and his beliefs and everything. But to know it ended like that, just, I don't know, it's kind of, sad, Like I said, I shouldn't have ended the episode on this, but regardless, I'm very interested to see ultimately where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.